Angus Young, how you doing?
Good, Becko.
The Offspring.
How's it going, Becko?
Dave Grohl, how you going, mate?
Good, man.
Pete, it's been a long time coming.
Oh, Becko, hasn't it indeed?
We go inside the dressing room, speak to the biggest names in music,
Keith Richards, the Rolling Stones.
and crack open their esky.
That's exactly how I imagine you, by the way, sitting opposite me with a vodka and orange.
You're a discerning chap. This is The Rider.
Hey, it's Becko. Welcome back to The Rider. Last week it was Sarah McLeod from the Super Jesus. Big news that there's new music from the Super Jesus coming in 2023, but it was just so nice catching up with Sarah. She's gone through so many changes in her life since COVID, moving to Brisbane, spending a lot more time with her dad there, and also a lot of time on the road with her acting career. So you can catch that right now. Just catch up on any platform, whether it's Spotify or Apple or Google. And also, Jim Kerr from Simple Minds, kicking back in his hotel room in Paris. Simple Minds on their promotional tour, celebrating a brand new album. You can get that right now on all platforms as well. And, of course, follow The Rider Pod on Instagram. This week, one of the most influential producers in Australian music history, Mark Opitz. And what a history it was, going back to being an engineer in the AC/DC days, working on one of the great AC/DC albums, Powerage, but also this one. And he was also instrumental in constructing the sound of the Angels. Of course, the album Face to Face is one of the must-haves when it comes to Aussie music. There was no exits. So already you're thinking, this guy Mark Opitz, influential when it came to pub rock, but the best was yet to come. He produced one of many Cold Chisel albums. There was Cold Chisel's East, and he explains this one. Circus Animals and 20th Century, and then that bond would continue with Jimmy working on his solo stuff. And then there was INXS. Now, he was so privileged to be there right at the beginning of INXS, moulding this young band and also moulding this incredible lead singer, Michael Hutchence. You can consider Shabooh as being their breakthrough album. And he was also all through to the 90s. Welcome to Wherever You Are. There was Full Moon, Dirty Hearts. And then, one of the great moments in Aussie music history, INXS teaming up with Jimmy Barnes for this one. And you're going to find out on The Rider in a matter of moments how that actually came together, and that actually wasn't the first song choice they were going to go with. So we'll talk more with Mark Opitz over the next hour or so. Mark, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on The Rider.
No worries, buddy. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, yeah. So these days you're on the Gold Coast.
But yeah, I get around. You know, I certainly get around. Go to Sydney actually on Thursday, do a project down there, then back and forth to Sydney a few times, all over the place. Let
There Be Rock by AC/DC, Face to Face, Angels, Powerage, No Exit, Cold Chisel's East. I mean, it just keeps going. And these are all iconic albums. And I mean, I will say that Powerage is AC/DC's greatest album they put out, especially during the Bon Scott era. I mean, you must pinch yourself.
To be there recording that album, you know, just with me and the boys and George and Harry was just fantastic. I mean, I spent weeks in preparation just getting the Malcolm and Angus's guitar amps ready. I had just a quick side story on that. A few weeks before they came into town, they got all the Marshalls were stored at Albert's for their Australian Marshalls. So I went through 8 Marshall amps and 16 boxes, and I paired every amp with every box. So basically it was 8 by 16 by 4 again, because I was testing every speaker. So I A-B'd every amp with every speaker that they had. It took me about 2 weeks to do it until I came up with, that's Angus's amp and that's Malcolm's amp. And I just put them in the studio and said, Malcolm, that's yours. Angus, that's yours. You know, way you go. And we got a pretty good guitar sound on it album.
You're a perfectionist, clearly, because no one would have that patience.
It wasn't about being a perfectionist. It was about just doing what I thought. Preparation is everything, you know. And particularly in when you're dealing with art and music, it's because you're looking for spontaneity and everything like that. So in other words, your preparation has got to be complete before someone comes in and they're relaxed, they can play, it sounds good for them and everything like that. So it's about before they walk in the room, I want everything to be right. You know, that's the way it worked. And
also a part of an album which is a big change for AC/DC as well. It was the last Vanda and Young album. It was when they went into the Mutt Lange era as well.
That's right.
That also made that album so special.
It did. It was the last one in Australia. I actually started recording another one with them when they were looking at changing producers, and so they got in I can't remember his name. He was a famous guy, did lots of stuff in America at the time with Kiss, who I ended up working with anyway. This producer didn't really work out, so they went and found Mutt, and that was that. And unfortunately, they didn't take me with them. But, you know, that's worse things have happened.
So are those recordings on the shelf somewhere? I mean, I guess they must be. Was there much recorded?
I guess there would be. I haven't got any of them, but they would be on the shelf somewhere. I'm just trying to think of the producer's name. He worked with Hendrix and lots of people like that.
And you might be able to confirm this for me, because one of the famous stories of the recording of the song "Let There Be Rock," I think Rick Brewster told me this because he was probably standing with you in the studio. He said that first take, it was okay, you know, and they were like, yeah, it's pretty good. You know what? Give it one more go. And then they went and did Let There Be Rock again. And just at the end of the final bit, the final crescendo, the guitar solo, the amp blew up right at the very end.
That's right.
Imagine, I mean,
that's exactly right. No, we look, you know, I remember when we were doing Riff Raff, and it was just me and Angus in the studio, and Angus was in the control room, and he was doing the solo to Riff Raff, and he was just kicking the back of my chair, running into me, just doing his running around the studio stuff, but just blitzing it, you know, and I was getting bruised and everything. He didn't mean to do it, but it's just the way he played. I mean, he never had the SG out of his hands, you know. It was always a cup of tea, cigarette, and the SG, and even he'd take the SG to the toilet. We had that Powerage album was the first album that we used remotes, didn't use leads. We had remotes on the guitars, and so he'd go up into the bathroom, to the toilet, and I could still hear him playing amid grunts. You know?
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. A great guy, and like Malcolm and myself and Phil Rudd, because we do the sessions like on Powerage, we'd start at 8 o'clock at night and we'd finish at 6 o'clock in the morning, so it had the real nighttime feel to it and things like that. So invariably, Malcolm Young, myself, and Phil Rudd would rent a tinny at Rose Bay and go out in the middle of Rose Bay, you know, Sydney Harbour at 8:30 in the morning with a few, you know, hand lines over the side, 6-pack, couple of joints, you know, watching people going to work. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
And of course, you're working those reverse hours, you know, in the studio, and it must have been incredible to be around that band, and you knew something was special.
I was a fan, a big music fan, and who considered myself incredibly lucky to be where I was. You know, to me, I was like, you know, how the hell did I get here? And there I was, just doing this stuff, you know, and hanging out with Bon, and, you know, just fantastic, just fantastic. The rehearsals, George Young played bass because Cliff he still had a visa problem, so I've got a couple of great shots of where it's just George, Malcolm, and Angus playing together, you know, and stuff like that. Just fabulous times. So I've always got those to look at.
So let's go back to the beginning. Long before you were in the studio with AC/DC, you were starting off at the ABC, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
You had aspirations of being a program director, and you were there in the building. And
I had aspirations when I was at high school. My last year of high school, I either wanted to be the best movie director in Australia or the best record producer in Australia. They were firm thoughts in my head. So, after a lot of, I was living in Brisbane and I went to Sydney, and my mum knew someone who knew someone who knew someone in the ABC. And after 6 months of odd jobs, I did an interview finally, and then a few months later, they finally got in touch with me to do another interview and said, "Oh yeah, come and work in TV studios as a cameraman, whatever, the trainee, what they call technical operator, which is basically studio crew. And you get taught sound, vision mixing, editing, camera, and all that sort of stuff. So I actually started off there, and that was great. And then one time. The ABC in its charter says every office of the ABC should be able to move freely within all organised departments of the ABC so as to be of use to the ABC and garner as much knowledge as possible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Remember, this is the 70s. And so they had the best gear, they had the best training equipment. So anyway, so I applied for this job as assistant cine cameraman on a TV series called Seven Little Australians. And so I left TV studios and went into the film unit, and which I was entitled to do, and worked on this series, Seven Little Australians, for months. Then when I came back to TV studios, they're upset that I'd left, and by that stage I was a cameraman in ABC, and I'm dreaming of being a director and all that, and they said, "You know what, we're going to punish you." I didn't say it in so many words, but we're going to transfer you off camera now, and they were, just to punish me, they're going to put me in audio, and what they really thought was the worst punishment they could give me was to put me in music audio. And I went, "Oh, sounds great to me." And so then I'm off working with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and opening at the Sydney Opera House, and doing amazing stuff there with the opening of the Opera House, concert for the Queen, the Carol Burnett show for NBC, which we won an Emmy for, and all these things, so it was incredible. And so I just had to leave. When I got finished with my Opera House duties after about 6 months, for covering the pre-opening, and then for the first whatever after that, I did an opera with BBC as well called War and Peace. And then I thought it's boring to go back to TV studios, and so I left and played a bit of music for a while, then decided, okay, being a movie director didn't work out, time to be the music producer. So I summoned up, I got a list of all the record companies and recording studios in Sydney at the time, and the top of the list was EMI with their recording studio. So I've rung up and I've asked for an interview with the studio manager for advice, not for a job. That was the trick, for advice about working in the industry. So I got in the door, did all that. First thing he said, "There's no jobs here, but I'll give you all the advice you need." And he was talking on. Then we took wrapping up, and he said, "Oh, by the way, who is your mentor at the ABC?" And I said, "Oh, Noel Cantrell, the late and great Noel Cantrell." And he said, "Oh, Noel Cantrell? Yeah, we've got a job for you right now." And so I was made a mastering engineer, basically.
Wow.
And so it started off from there, and EMI was great for a few years, and Vander and Young asked me to be their apprentice, and that was that.
And to think all those years later you won a Countdown Award as well.
That was so funny. When my first Countdown Award that I won, I knew everyone on the crew because it was done in Sydney, and so all my mates were on camera, doing the camera and the audio and all that sort of stuff. So they were great. I said, "Hey guys," so, they were just all over me, saying fantastic, great work, all that sort of stuff.
With AC/DC, what made Bon Scott so special? If we talked about Angus, what about Bon?
Bon was the glue. I mean, without Bon, there'd be no AC/DC. It'd be, if they just had a normal singer and Angus running around the stage, it would have been a bit of a joke. But the fact was that they just suited each other so well. There's so many shots of Angus on Bon's shoulders, for example. And Bon was the oldest guy in the band. He was just an amazing guy. The only guy that I've met that's similar to him would be Michael Hutchence, except Bon even had more confidence than Michael had, you know. And Bon, you know, he was great, you know. I remember one night when we're doing Powerage, he said, Malcolm and Angus, or Malcolm's on me because Malcolm's the leader of the band. So I've got to write some lyrics, Mark, and I've got to go home. We've got nothing to smoke. So I pulled out this tiny little bit of hash I've got and broke it in half and gave it to him, you know. And then 6 months later, he's back off an American tour, and I was in the studios wandering around. I can hear, Mark. I look around, it's Bon chasing me. He said, oh, mate, yeah, I've been looking for you for a couple of days. I said, yeah, I've been away. Had a break. And he said, oh, and he reaches into his back pocket, pulls out like a block of what looks like a block of Cadbury's, giant block of Cadbury's chocolate, which was hash, broke it in two, and said, here's the half I owe you.
Wow.
I mean, and the fact that he remembered, the fact that he chased me down, the fact that he gave me way more than I had, like 10 times what I gave him. He was that guy, you know. He was. I used to call Michael Mr. Sin, you know, but Bon was Mr. Sin. Bon had a glint in his eye, you know, and a great lyric writer, you know. That's the difference with Powerage and a lot of, you know, the early AC/DC stuff, like She's Got the Jack and all that. They're all sort of flippant sort of lyrics, but when he got into you know, Powerage, and you get the lyrics for something like Gone Shootin' and Riff Raff and stuff like that, it's just on another level, total different level.
Do you think they could have had the same success if Bon hadn't passed away?
Yeah, I think Highway to Hell, the album before it really kicked them off. I mean, we laid great groundwork with credibility with Powerage. You know, I mean, I've had many people come up to me and say, that's my favourite album. People from, like Gene Simmons from Kiss, Keith Richards, people like that. You know, that's easily the best album. And a lot of the AC/DC diehards are the same. But, you know, like when they got together with Mutt, I think they were well on the way. I think, you know, Highway to Hell was a fantastic album, and I think the next album would have been pretty huge. And the thing is, the chemistry between Angus and Bon on stage was just fantastic. Just fantastic, because they, you know, one was a foil for the other always.
Yeah.
You know, and you got Malcolm in his right hand laying down that groove, the rhythm guitar, and you got Phil Rudd, who's just a ridiculously solid drummer, and particularly when he was playing with Cliff, you know, and Mark Evans was good too, but I think the change to having Cliff on bass was you know, I could see that during Powerage difference, what was going on there.
Yeah,
it was fantastic, you know. But I do think they would have been successful, just because they were just, you know, hard workers, man. I mean, George Young, as their mentor, he'd been there with the easy beats, and he knew all the mistakes, you know, that you could fall into. He'd had fame, albeit brief, as the easy beats in England, but they were, you know, with Friday on My Mind, everyone wanted to know who the easy beats were. I mean, the Beatles, everybody wanted to know about them. And so he'd seen the traps of success and what it took to keep success, you know, what about good management, you know, money and all that. But you know, with AC/DC, they were so lucky to have George. I mean, to have the band they had within themselves, to have George and Harry in the background. But more importantly, I've got two heroes in this business. One's Michael Gudinski and the other's Ted Albert. Ted Albert in the background. Yep, do that. Yep, I'll pay for this. Yep, do that. Yep, do that. And just had them touring and touring and touring. You know, he was paying, he was financing them all the way through, you know, all that period. And that was the trick, was, you know, get to America and England as soon as possible and just play. I don't care if it's 2 minutes and a dog you're playing to, just play. Just play. Led Zeppelin did the same thing. They arrived in New York as an unknown British band and toured right across America. By the time they got to Los Angeles, their album was #1. And in a similar way with AC/DC, they just played and played and played. Not as accessible at that point as Led Zeppelin, of course, and probably a little bit earlier. But just, yeah, they just were hard workers. Just super hard workers, but they had the support, you know, behind infrastructure behind them.
And it's interesting how that same formula has happened over the years with so many great Australian bands. It's that attitude of going on the road, playing more than one gig a day, particularly in Sydney. You know, you had bands like INXS doing 2 or 3 gigs a day, and Chris Murphy had the same attitude with INXS when they started off. He said,
"Well, it's a lot of bands. All the successful bands that have come from acts that have come from Australia have got their international career in sync immediately. They haven't waited for 4 albums and went to come big here and then do it. They've done it in sync. AC/DC did it from the first album when they were playing to Two Men and the Dog in America and England. Little River Band, Glenn Wheatley, absolutely same thing. With INXS, they waited 2 albums to do it. After we did Shabooh Shoobah, that then they figured they had a record they could go with to do it. The Bee Gees going right back, they did it. Midnight Oil mightn't have been as successful as INXS, but very successful international band. Many times when I was working in America, I'd be driving down the freeway in my Mustang convertible. You get treated really well in America. I turn the radio on and the beds are burning, sort of pumping out, stuff like that. Or I'd hear an INXS song and I'd go, gee, where do I know that song? Oh, shit, I did that, stuff. But so, it's all about getting your career in sync internationally as soon as possible. And these days, it's you can get your career in sync pretty much straight away, but whether you'll be successful is another thing, because it's, people have got to find you on YouTube. People have got to know you exist, so it's a little easier and a little harder at the same time.
Yeah. And I guess when you talk about all those bands that have had success overseas, the one band that should have, but just were never managed to crack it was Cold Chisel. They always thought they tried, and it's such a shame.
It is a shame, but I remember finishing, as you know, I'd done East, and I was, and when I did East, I was head of A&R at Warner, so it was pretty easy to do that album in terms of control what was going on.
Yeah.
But by the end, when we did Circus Animals, I can remember, I was really worried that, that we didn't have enough singles, because Don had gone into a period where he didn't want to have a pop album. I mean, he denies it, but he's saying to me, I don't want to do another pop album, but East wasn't a pop album for a start. But so he was writing all this dark stuff, and I was just looking through all the demos, going, God, what's my single going to be? What's my single? And then I remember I was at the Parramatta League Club one night, and Jimmy said, we're going to do a new song that Steve's written. It's called Blue Parrot Blues or something like that. And it was just fantastic. And it was turned into Forever Now. It's a 7-minute version of Forever Now, as you know, that song. And I went backstage and I said, Steve, you've saved my fucking ass. You've saved my ass. You have to get that out. And you've saved me, because that's a single. Oh, do you like that one? Here's another one. Have a listen to this. This one's called When the War Is Over, and he played me his demo of that, and I've gone, you are not serious. But I still needed a rock track. And so Jimmy came to the party big time, and he'd written a song in about 20 minutes not 20 minutes. We wrote it in the studio, but we were fooling around. Ian Moss would always fool around with the Start Me Up Rolling Stones riff, that riff.
Yeah,
and we'd just be jamming on that. And out of that, we just went to another place with it. And Jimmy wrote, "You've Got Nothing I Want," and he was obviously referring to the American market. Just to answer your question, why didn't make it in America, and all the lyrics in that are about stuff you America, because they'd gone there with East and stuff like that, and it just that the Americans thought My Baby was the single, and they released it. So they've gone, instead of with Cultures, you got to go Full Metal Jacket with them to get to see them live. You can't release a song like My Baby and say this is a great rock band. And so, but when we finished Circus Animals, I remember driving home with my wife at the time at about 8 a.m, and I'm saying, you know what, they're never going to make it in America. And I said, and she said, why? And I said, because they like Vegemite. You grow up with Vegemite in Australia and you love the taste, but you give Vegemite to an adult American, they just don't get it. And that's the problem, as I was saying before, you know, by this stage, you know, Circus Animals was album number, 4. And they were huge in Australia, so big after East, you know, with the 5 times platinum album that East was. And then Circus Animals would go 5 times platinum as well, but they left their run too late. They weren't in sync immediately, and all the songs were very Australian orientated. I mean, it sort of worked with Men at Work because they did pop, you know, it was all poppy, you know, down under and all that sort of stuff. Flippant down under stuff. But where Chisel were coming from was a real credible, in your face, you know, this is us. They had their own style, and their style had developed long before they got to America. So it was you know, and the American record company was no help. They, you know, in the way that they thought, you know, they would be, in the way they treated them. The other thing, of course, was that because they'd gone platinum in Australia, it automatically kicked in an American release contract. And so rather than the A&R guy at Warner's or Electro finding Cold Chisel, it was the president saying to the A&R people, you have to release this, or to the marketing people. So they had no. So those people who were working the record had no skin in the game, so to speak. You know, they were just told to work with them, and so they just made their own decisions, which weren't the correct ones. So it was unfortunate, you know. But I mean, arguably, Cold Chisel in Australia are bigger than AC/DC, bigger than anybody, bigger than INXS, but nowhere near their force in America. It's a very funny situation to be in.
And also, if you ask many musicians, they all know the Angels and what an influence they had on some of those great rock bands overseas. And in fact, you know, Matt Sorum from Guns N' Roses always talks about, you know, Angel City, you know, and they.
Yeah, well, that's why I got offered the Guns N' Roses album.
There you go.
Because the first album I was offered by Geffen. And I got this message, you know, from Kolodner or who it was, and saying, "Oh yeah, man, these guys are the real thing. You know, this is a real rock band, and they love Rose Tattoo and the Angels and the work you've done. So, you know, would you be interested in producing?" And they had start dates, they had everything locked in, all this sort of stuff. Then they kept sending me this press about. They've just burnt, Guns N' Roses have just burnt down this recording studio. They've just burnt down their manager's house. And I'm going, holy shit, who are these people? I mean, I knew that LA Guns and Hollywood Rose. I knew where they'd come from. But unfortunately, you know, at that time I was due to start a new band called Noiseworks. And, you know, so I sort of had, I said, what do I do? Do I do Noiseworks or this unknown band in America and that are creating havoc and, you know, burning places down? And so I said, you know, I'd already done No Lies with Noiseworks as a single. So I said, I better do what I'm committed to do. And, you know, and I was a bit scared of the Guns N' Roses issue anyway. Who knew? You know, I had no idea. Mind you, they went through 12 producers before they came up with the guy they ended up using. So I could have been, you know, producer fodder. Who knows? But I didn't end up doing that album, obviously, or I wouldn't be talking to you right now, would I?
That's right. You would not be here.
No, I'd be on my yacht in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, that's right. This is one thing that a lot of people don't think of. You got to mould INXS. You know, you were there for their breakthrough album, in my opinion. I always look at Shabooh Shoobah as the one. And
it's 40th anniversary, I think, last week of the album. I've actually remixed the US Us Festival with all the Shabooh Shoobah tracks on it. It's going to come out on vinyl with Shabooh Shoobah's being released on vinyl, and we'll have an extra vinyl of the 1983 Us Festival, which was an Apple organised, you know, Steve Wozniak from Apple organised. and they're playing in front of like 150,000 people, and I remixed that just a couple of months ago. So that's all coming out shortly. But as you say, with INXS was another interesting story because I'd known Chris Murphy for some time, and he was the Angels booker. In fact, when I finished Face to Face, one of the first people that I got into the studio to listen to the album was Chris Murphy, because he was their booker at Nucleus, or whatever the agency was.
Right, yeah.
And so we developed a relationship there, and then he could see, and he'd listened to what I'd done with Face to Face, as opposed to what Vander and Young had done with the first album, which was nothing like it. And he always kept that in mind. And then he rang me up one day and said, I'm sending you 3 songs. One's called Johnson's Airplane, another one's called Black and White, and another one's called The One Thing. I want you to pick one and do what you want with it, and then do a single with the band. And so he sent me the tracks over. Johnson's Airplane, loved it, but I didn't consider it a single for a band like that. Black and White, really good, really great track, but again, a bit ahead of its time to come out. The One Thing was great, except it had all these odd little syncopated bits in it. So I got my tape recorder out and edited all these little odd bits out between every verse. You go, people, just change the feel all of a sudden that Andrew would like to do. And so I just edited those out and put the song back together, had a meeting with the band, said, this is the way I want to do it. I want it to be a slow build all the way through and be guitar orientated, and just, because it's all about the audience. It's all about the audience. So if we can get the audience on board and get radio play on board, this will do it. This is the one. And so we ended up doing The One Thing, and that was it. So that was my INXS career done and dusted right there. Because then they took that single off to America. And I've been told this, they're going to do this. And so they took the single around America and UK. I think it was Kirk, Andrew and Michael, looking for a big-time producer to do and they play this song to them and say, well, this is where we're at, and we want you to do the rest of the album to all these producers. And, they got, Bob Clearmountain said to him, I think, and there was a few others as well, I said, what the hell are you talking to me for? Why aren't you using this guy? How does he get that vocal sound? How does he get that drum sound? You should be using this guy. And so they came back from Europe and America, and, sort of tails between the legs a little bit, I guess. And sort of Murphy rang me up, said, well, the trip to overseas was great, but we want you to do the whole album. And I said, sure, let's go. And, and we got some killer tracks like Don't Change and To Look at You and a few others out of it. And I took a long time with it because I was very conscious. The first 2 albums were Shabooh is nothing like the first 2 albums at all, because Michael actually talks a lot. He sings in those first 2 albums. He doesn't sing. And I was speaking to him one night, there was just he and I in the studio, and I had a song called Jan's Song, which is an absolutely crucial song in INXS's career. And Michael said, I just don't know what to do. It's very musical, and I don't know how to sing. And I said, Michael, and this is about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, I said, mate, just go in the room there, just sing it to me any way you want to sing it to me, and sing it to me 5 times. Just don't be scared. Don't care if you go out of pitch. Just try anything. And so he went and did 5 takes, and they're all different. And I said, okay, that's great. Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. And I spent all night just editing together a composite of all those takes. And so it had the right, bits of melody from here, this from here, this from here. And so it just had this, so it just ran through. I just caught all the little good bits that I thought were there, and then just put them all together on top of the song called Jan's Song. The next day, Michael came in and I played it to him, and he said, bullshit, is that me? And I said, that's you. And I said, that's the power of the studio. You've got to let yourself go. We can take care of the rest. And so I, in my selfish little heart, think that that's where Michael learned to sing in the studio, was on a song called Jan's Song from Shabooh. That's the first time he actually, and then after that it was easy. He's just dead easy with everything.
And he wasn't a comfortable lead singer, was he, at that stage? And maybe that was the moment
Not at that
too.
stage. I was lucky enough to do the Wembley, in front of a couple of 100,000 people concert. And that's just the best I've ever heard him sing at that show. And that was just insane how good he was at that. But yeah, you're right. He was shy and retiring at that stage. And because, he was only in the band because, he was Andrew's best friend and everyone else could play an instrument. So you might as well be the singer. You're a poet. You can be, and he was a poet at that stage when the Farris brothers first formed. And, but he was Andrew's best mate at school. And so, which gives you some indication, Andrew's shy, retiring type as well, as Michael was. But Michael just burst out of his, he bloomed, he blossomed.
Yeah.
He went from this shy, pimply face guy that we first met, while I was doing East, I think I actually met he and Kirk, in the Hang Around studio. And Richard Clapton album I was producing, and then Richard went off to produce them or something like that. But the change, because I'd sort of seen them, and even before we did Shabooh, when I was made head of A&R at Warner's, the first band I tried to sign was INXS, but 2 days before they'd signed with Deluxe Records, and did the first 2 albums with them. So I don't know, but anyway, those first 2 albums were, to me, are nothing like where we got to. It was a quantum shift on Shabooh away from everything else, and then everything graduated from there. And even when I came back with the band, we were great mates all the way through. When they did the swing, they brought it back to when they brought it back to Australia before they played it to the record company. They hired a studio for 2 days and wanted me to listen to it, wanted me to go through and say, yeah, it was okay, which I did, of course. And I thought, yeah, it's great. I listened to every track over 2 days. All of us in the studio just pulling things apart, listening to it. And I thought, yeah, it's great, just go. And then we became partners in Ryan Osler's studio. So we were, and to this day, a great mates, Johnny Farris and I caught up a couple of weeks ago at a Kiss concert backstage there. I speak to every now and again, to see Tim Kirk and Andrew. I saw the last time I saw Andrew was unfortunately with Chris Murphy's funeral at Ballina. But no, they're great people, and that's the great thing about when you go into a studio with someone for a couple of months, you become family, and even if you don't see each other for a year, you're family when you get back together again. You pick up where you leave off.
When you heard the stuff they had recorded in New York City, they recorded Original Sin.
Power Station. That's where I did the Vinyl's first album. That
sound was a very different sound to what they'd done previously. Was that confronting to hear the drums particularly?
Not really. No, I mean, I knew the studio very well, and I met Nile Rodgers very early on in the Chic days because, as I said, I worked at Power Station for 3 months. With the Vinyls in '82, and Bob Clearmountain and everyone. That's how I met all those people, and I met Niall, and so I know it wasn't confronting to me at all because I knew that Niall was producing, and and I know the full story. Like they just played it, and and they were setting up virtually and playing it through, rehearsing it. Niall had all his mates in the studio and was chatting away to them, and then they rehearsed a few times. What they didn't know, that Niall had the record button pressed the whole time. Until after one month, a few run-throughs, and they did another one. Just between themselves, they didn't even know that it was being recorded. Niall said, yep, that's it, that's the one. And so then Niall came down and sort of said, oh, yeah, what about some of this kind of guitar? And Andrew Farris is just the best funk guitar player. And so Andrew just lays down the stuff, just killed it. Then we'll get some backing vocals. Got a mate, we'll get him to come in. Daryl Hall came in, did some backing vocals with Michael and Kirk, and bang, it was all pretty quick, really. And so, no, I wasn't shocked to hear anything like that because I knew that they were a good band, and and I was busy doing whatever I was doing as well, while they were off doing that. And that was, as I said, they came back and played me the entire album. The rest of it they did with Nick Launay, They played me that. So I heard Original Sin before anyone else in the country heard it. And I just said, yeah, sounds good to me, man. Killer track. Might have a bit of politics problem with it in America, but political problems. But the, being black and white, etc. But no, it's great. I was very happy for it.
It must have been incredible to see Michael mature. And you mentioned it earlier, how he'd gone from this pimply, shy little kid to being this sexy lead singer. And I heard a story, I don't know if it's true, but your then wife was famous because she knocked back Michael. She's known as the only woman to ever say no to Michael Hutchence. Is that true?
That's a good story. I don't know. Yeah, okay, thanks for that. I'll just jot that down. Yeah. It could well have been. Oh, good friends, no question. But Michael, he was notorious, shall we say?
Yeah. So where were you when you heard the news that Michael had passed away?
I was in Bowral, New South Wales, and it was Saturday morning, I believe. Was it Sunday or Saturday?
Saturday, I think. I woke up Saturday, yeah.
Saturday morning, yeah, and my phone rang, and it was Chuggy, Michael Chug, and said, mate, there's a body in the room. He didn't say Michael's body or anything like that, but I knew that they were doing the tour, between the Frontier was doing the tour, Michael Gudinski and Michael Chug. He says, there's a body in the room, I just want to be the first to tell you, there's going to be a lot of shit going down now. And, and I said, but no, I was just shocked. Then 5 minutes later, Gudinski rings me up. He said, mate, I know Chuggy's spoken to you, but Michael is definitely dead. But I want you to do one thing for me. And I said, what's that, mate? He said, turn your phone off. Don't turn it on for 2 days. You don't want to be talking to all these people who are going to be hounding you and stuff like that. And so I did that. I turned my phone off, and I took Michael's, because Michael was one of my best mates, rest his soul, and it was great advice. And in fact, the first time I spoke to anyone about it, it was Lee Simon from Triple M. Because Lee and Michael were like virtually best mates for a long time there, And so then a couple of weeks after it all died down, Michael said, mate, do you want to speak to Lee? And I said, absolutely, I'll speak to Lee. And so, Lee and I sort of had a hour-long talk about it and all that sort of stuff. But, I was in Bowral. And so what I did is I, after Michael had called, is I gathered up my kids. I got 4 kids. They were very small at the time. Madeline would have been 3, and James would have been 5, and Alex would have been 7, and 3. James would have been 7. Alex was 9, and India was probably 11 or something. And I just got them, put them all in the I think I had a Ford Bronco at the time, big SUV, and drove from Bowral to Jamboree Park down near Wollongong. I just took all the kids to a fun park and let them go on any ride they wanted to go on, and I just sort of lay on the hill on the grass and just reflected looking at the clouds with my youngest daughter who couldn't go on any of the rides. But just reflecting on lots of things, that just stuff that me, Michael, and say Chris Bailey from the Saints in Paris getting shit-faced, not talking about music, just drinking cognac and talking about everything else, or, Michael and I having a beer with our backs against the wall, literally our backs against a wall that was heated by the sun. We'd escaped from the rest of the band, and just because we had a villa in Capri, just he and I had a villa, and just drinking beers and just run away from everybody else. Or the time that, in Sydney Entertainment Centre that Michael came into the audience and up to my eldest daughter, India, she would have been, 10, and just sang to her and sat next to her, and it was after Kicks, They Never Tear Us Apart. He just sang with her in front of like full house in the side seat, sat there and just sang it to her. It was just a magical moment, there's lots of, any woman would give their right arm for that experience. And here's my 11-year-old daughter, just, Uncle Michael, and, Michael and Helena staying at my place in Bowral, or just Michael on the road with Michael, went on the road with him for the X tour. I was around the world because as a sort of music director or advisor, if you will, just for that huge tour after the success of Kick. And it was a mess. And in fact, Michael had rung me up before the tour and said, mate, I've got a first-class ticket waiting for you at pick it up at the airport. You're coming on. If you've got nothing on, you're coming on tour. And they, bang, that was it. And so private jets, Plaza, New York City. I did it. We just had a ball, just an absolute ball, because it was the first time of all their touring. They'd had great success all of a sudden, after all the touring, then great success with Kick. So it was no more tour buses. It was all private jets from that point. And I was on there. So I was like this. I was like an observer. It's like a fly on the wall in this. How the hell did I get here? And just with just stories that I can't tell anybody. Of things that happened on that tour, and just going to every gig, obviously, and then backstage straight after the gig, saying, "Okay, never tear us apart. The gap's great. Maybe we can stretch that gap out to stop a little longer. Have Kirk appear on top of the PA stack with his saxophone out of nowhere, stuff like that, and talk about running orders and, that's great, mate. Tim, you played great tonight. Fucking great, mate. Or whatever. Just, it was an easy job. And for nearly a year, I did that. South America, US, Canada, Europe, UK, obviously, and finished off back at Wembley Stadium as the last gig.
Imagine being there as their mentor, pretty much. What an honour! And
it was an honour. It was an honour. It was a total honour, and that's why I say we're still friends to this day. And I think of Michael often, obviously.
Yeah.
Or the Gypsy is what I used to call him. Like, as I said, a bit like Bon Scott, Mr. Sin. That's what he turned into. Like Bon was never the shy, retiring type that Michael was, but by the time we got to Wembley Stadium, man, I remember the bus ride going out there. Like there was the band and myself and a few others on the small bus going out. We had a police escort from Hampstead Heath going to Wembley. And Michael's just running up and down the aisle going, yeah, okay, this is and he was just super pumped. And then the dressing room, the massive dressing room at Wembley, and it's like Rolling Stones, there's, you name it, everyone, there's all these people everywhere, and then they're all kicked out of the dressing room just before going on stage. And then it was just me, Chris Murphy, Michael Long, the tour manager, Jeff Pope, who's in charge of security, the band, and the wardrobe mistress. Was all that was left in this giant dressing room. And I remember Michael, and I'm going around giving everyone the who Jack Gibson is?
Yeah, the footy coach.
The footy coach. I'm going around giving everyone the footy coach, one-on-one, pump up, it's going to be great. And then I went off and I'm standing at one point, then Michael just saunters over to me, right? And that Michael walk, and he's got a pair of headphones on, and he's got a Walkman. And he says, Mark, he said, check this out. And he's put these headphones on that, and he pressed play, and he had a pre-release copy of a Massive Attack album called Blue Lines. He says, how cool is this? And I said, this is amazing. He said, open up your hand. So I opened up my hand, and he puts an ecstasy pill in it. Right? And he said, the fifth song is this, and I said, yeah, The Stairs. I knew what the songs were in the set. He said, yeah, that's when we were all having them, all right? So drop it at the start of The Stairs. And so there we are. I've got Man & Mobile recording it. I'm in the BBC truck mixing it for, England, because the BBC were putting it out live over England at the time. and at the top of the slipped us into my mouth, and and it was the best concert they ever played. But not many people would know about. I don't know if all the band took it, but Michael definitely did, and I seem to remember seeing Kirk chewing on stage, and whatever. But I know Michael definitely did, and I did, and I think, and one or two of the others would have. But it was so amazing that under those conditions that he gave the best performance of his life.
Well, it's
Mind you,
lack of fear, and also when they started off, they felt like they were unstructured. They kind of just started jamming as they came out.
It was totally unstructured. I was in the dressing room, and when it's and talked with the guys, and John had gone down early to check his drum kit, and he just got on his kit and just started playing. That was not rehearsed. That start was not rehearsed. And everyone goes, holy fuck, and runs down to the stage, because they could hear. John had just got overwhelmed by the size of this fucking audience, So he said, so I better play, and just started, and it was total freak the way that show actually started. The running, and also the other thing was, it was a different running order than we'd done for the rest of the tour, and it was the only time on the whole tour they didn't play "Don't Change," which was such a pity, because it was their best gig. They would have done a killer version of it, and but they didn't. And but at the same token, that kept them fresh, I guess, changing the set list as well. But that start was totally unrehearsed.
You worked with them obviously in the 80s and then in the 90s, and did you see Michael change when we all heard that he had changed after the head injury?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was, Helena and I were good buddies as well. And so I knew what had happened, by the time we got to Capri and stuff like that, between Welcome to Wherever You Are, which, again, that's my favourite INXS album. It's also their favourite INXS album.
Yeah.
And where you'd think Kick is, but, Kick's a bit pop, I think, for most of the band. Where with Welcome, we had to push the boundaries again, just like Shabooh Shoobah. And in fact, I used Shabooh Shoobah as a template. But when Michael had the altercation with the taxi driver in Denmark, it was he changed definitely. He and I shared a villa, for the entire time. And in the middle of the night, he just woke me up, said, "That's it. I'm going. I'm leaving the band. I can't do this anymore." And he'd lost a lot of his sense of taste and a lot of his sense of smell, and that really upset him. And with that, he also lost a lot of confidence. But he had this dark inner soul coming out as well at the same time, and that's why some of the vocals on Full Moon, Dirty Hearts, like Freedom Deep, is just beautiful. And unfortunately, that album didn't get its exposure because of music changed. Nirvana was now on top, and it was that alternate music had really pushed everyone aside. So it didn't really get the recognition it really should have deserved. We had Chrissy Hine, we had Ray Charles, it should have been a big album.
Yeah.
But he changed, and I mean, even in the studio, like he'd get, outrageously drunk or whatever, and then the next morning we'd be in the control room, and he'd bring up Bono in the control room. Michael, you don't have to bring up Bono in front of us, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
I've got great friends, and he'd be speaking to Bono about stuff, and then just to reassure himself, I think, But it seemed to have lost it with his sense of smell and sense of taste gone. He seemed to have lost a bit of self-esteem along with it, because he just didn't feel everything changed, and he'd become aggravated. I mean, I saw him throw a beer at someone, and one of the other band members pull a knife on another band member, but not in a threatening way, but it's still, ooh, that's not Michael. And stuff like that. Other times he'd be great, and just be laughing. We'd be laughing and doing stuff. As I said, sneaking off, having a beer, or all of us going to a bar on the Isle of Capri, and there'd be no one in the bar. You know, I remember one night this bar called Max's Bar. It's not there anymore, but there was Max, the bar guy who owned the bar, was up at the bar with a girl called Costanza, we found out later on, and another guy, might have been Jerry, and we're all down at the other end of the bar, end of the room, and, you know, there's no one there. So Michael says, on the count of 3, let's rush the bar. And so 1, 2, and so we just went up, you know, screaming and yelling and rushed the bar. Yeah, and then it was just free drinks all night. You know, it was just everyone just laughed. The people up there laughed. We became amazing friends with them. My engineer ended up dating Costanza, and she was the daughter of the most famous jeweler on the island as well. So, and he ended up living there for a couple of years. I ended up living there for about 2 or 3 years as well. But yeah, it was fun times. You know, like. Yeah, Michael will be, well, you know, it's remembered like Jim Morrison, remembered like a lot of people, you know, gone far too young. But, you know, I guess, you know, it's one of the only good thing to come out of Michael's death was that he'll always be remembered as that young guy. You know, that what he was. There's no photos of him around as a 62-year-old, which he would be now. You know, or 63 or 64. But so his star didn't just fade off. It cut short. You know, it just went over the horizon.
Well said. Well said. And some people definitely weren't meant to grow old. You know, some of these rock stars, many who've left us, some weren't meant to be that way, you know. And there were others where you're surprised they actually have lived through the 80s and the 90s. There must be a few where you've just gone, wow. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Jimmy Barnes, one of my best mates.
Yes.
I can't believe that Jimmy's still alive, you know. The guy's had, you know, bypass surgery and to watch him grow from, you know, it's a bit like Michael. He's again, there's another one that's similar to Michael and Bon. You know, wild man, you know, when I first met him, great guy. You know, when I first met him, way before they did the first album, when EMI auditioned them for a contract that knocked them back, which I couldn't believe, or the house producer couldn't believe. We both said these guys should be signed. But EMI, Colin Peterson from the Bee Gees was the head of A&R at the time, and he said, no, I don't like them. And so they weren't signed. And that's up to Colin's taste, that's fair enough. And they eventually signed by Warner's and did all that. But Jimmy has gone. I've seen, and it's, well, you know, Jimmy's very public about it. You know, his drug era and his drinking and all that sort of stuff. I've seen him. I've been with him in LA and he's crying in my arms, you know, and stuff like that, just from, you know, just buying too much cocaine and stuff like that and drinking. And now, you could not find a nicer person on the planet or a more generous person in spirit than Jimmy Barnes. I mean, I spent time with him in Bangkok about a month ago, a week with he and Jane. And it's just, you know, as I said to him, both of them at the time, I said, Jimmy, you know, I cannot believe the state of grace that you've achieved. You know, and I mean, sure, he gets a fair few knockers, you know, like from the NRL grand final, and everyone's saying he's screaming and all that sort of stuff. But that's, you know, that's not who the guy is. What he's doing is he's given 110%. That's why it's coming out like that, you know. And but you know, I heard him singing at Colleen's funeral in Thailand, Colleen Ironside. He and Jane would do, before the funeral went for 4 or 5 days, and every before the monks' prayers would start, Jim and Jane would get up and do 4 songs on an acoustic guitar, and he was just singing magnificently, just fantastic, and singing with soul as well. And so the Jimmy I know is, as I said, is never have I met anyone as generous as him with his heart and his spirit. Whereas the state of grace that he's in at the moment is insane. It's just beautiful. And I've said to Jimmy, you know, how did you do it, man? I mean, I've never lived a life as wild as you, but I would I would pay a fortune or I would give my left arm to achieve the state of grace that you have mentally at the moment. Not talking about the money or fame or anything like that. I'm talking about his mental state, where he is in his life. It's a fabulous guy. Fabulous guy.
You're not the only one who's said that to me in literally the last week. We are all enjoying Jimmy maturing into this wonderful family man, a grandfather, the bloke who's cooking in the kitchen with Jane and looking after the geese. And
it's insane. I talk to my kids about it because my children and his children are best friends, all of them, India and Mahalia, best mates, James and Jackie, best mates. Alex and EJ, best mates. Have been. They all went to school together, grew up together and stuff like that. Not so much Madeline and Ellie Mae because there were different circumstances around him because we'd moved to Barrel. Jimmy moved out of Barrel. Jimmy went to France where I visited him while he was living there. Yeah, so our families are very much tied together. But, I see the same things and I say to the kids, I just can't believe this. Here's Jimmy with a bunch of hydrangeas in his hand, with a big smile on his face, and then he is with an apron on, cooking this, and they've released this cookbook, and it's like perfect. It's perfect, it's an ideal life. And Jane was no wallflower as well. Man, it's just to see what they've both done, and you can't say Jimmy without saying Jane. You just can't, and because they are a team. And that's what's made it work. And they've been through hell together. Hell, from all, as you can imagine, with Jimmy doing what he was doing and stuff like that. And then, Jane's no wallflower, but God, what a great couple they are now. It's just what a way, to holding hands, walking off into the sunset together. It's just a thing of beauty watching it,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Great. And Jimmy's an icon, he's risen above that. He's not a rock star at all. He's an Australian institution is what he is. He's not a rock star. Other people are rock stars. He's transitioned way past that, like John Farnham has as well, But I'd say he and Farnsey and Barnsey they're icons.
And I think you were there when your two biggest artists crossed paths, and I'm talking about Jimmy and INXS doing Good Times. That was an incredible moment.
Good Times was very interesting, because, that was made for Australia Made, the tour. We needed a song to promote the tour. And so INXS wanted to do Turn Up Your Radio by Masters Apprentices. And Jimmy and I were living in Barrel at the time, and Jimmy's manager was Mark Pope. And so it came time to go to the studio. So Mark Pope's picked us both up and driving us up the studio. And as he's driving us up the studio, he said, look, I got Glenn A. Baker to put together 10 songs, good Australian songs to cover, and I've had a listen to them. And I want you to listen to this one because I reckon you should do it. I think you guys should do that and not turn up your radio. This is Mark Pope. I don't know if you know Mark Pope.
Yeah. Well,
but he a great guy, fantastic guy. And again, he's been around as long as I have. And so Mark put the song on, and it was Good Times by the Easy Beats. And so as soon as I heard the Easy Beats, any chance I get to do an Easy Beat Vandron Young cover because of what they did for me, I did it. I do it like, the Vinyls, I'll Make You Happy, I did with the Divinals and this and a couple of other songs with other people. And this song, came up, and I remember talking to George about Good Times, in the studio, and George and Harry went on a break. It was the three of us. I said, George, who did the high harmony? Gonna have a good time tonight in that version. So, did Harry? Did you? He said, no. Steve Marriott was of the Small Faces. Was in the studio next door recording, and so we asked him if he'd come and sing on the chorus.
Wow,
and that's fucking. And I said, that's Jimmy, Steve Marriott.
Yeah,
that's Jimmy's. And so I said, it's a Vandron Young song. Got to do it. B, I know the story about the high vocal in it. It comes from Steve Marriott, and I don't know if everyone knows that or not. But yeah, that's and I thought Jimmy's sound and Jimmy and Steve Marriott singing the same register. I said, perfect. So we got to the studio and breaking the news to the band, you know, and to the INXS. We said, Mark Opitz come up with this song, the Vander and Young song, and we think this is the one to do. And everyone said, yeah, great, okay. Mark, you go out and tell Jim Keys we're not doing his song. Jim Keys had flown up from Melbourne, you know, the Master Apprentices outside. I didn't know. And in the green room, and I had to go out and say, oh, it's great you flew up here, Jim. We'll fix your airfares up, but we're actually not doing your song. You know, we're going to be going with a Vander and Young song called Good Times. And so we did that song and the B-side over the weekend and the video, shot it all. Yeah, we shot the video at Rhino. I recorded and mixed both songs in 1.5 days. Just bang, bang, bang. Tim Farriss wasn't there, and that's why he was fishing at the time, so he couldn't make it. But Peter Kickel from Jimmy's, the late, great Peter Kickel, piano player, he was the guy playing piano, just a killer piano player when you listen to Good Times. And I actually, in fact, have a copy of Good Times without any vocals on, which I play a lot. And it's the mix without vocals. And John Farris's drumming is insane. Big fill, he comes in, then straight into the verse on him. Comes out of the fill straight on time. It's ridiculously good. And I got little interchanges going between Andrew Farriss on guitar and Peter Kickel, where they play with and be answered, you know, question and answer thing going on, and where I'd edit those in together because, you know, stuff like that. And so, and then the band left, you know, on the Saturday afternoon. Michael and Jimmy go out, and the other guys went home or something. And so I'm sitting there mixing it by myself, and it just came together. And then Michael and Jimmy came in to have a listen, and they said, "Yeah, sounds mega." And so that was what we went with. You know. So yeah, it was a great time for you know, all of us to be there and do the same thing, you know. And then again, you know, Michael and Jimmy and I were at Michael's funeral together as well. You know, I was sitting with Jimmy at that. So it's a sad time, but no, that was great, you know. And it was such a sad thing that later on with Michael going, but you know, the good times were literally the good times as well.
Well, Jimmy added many years later that they looked absolutely hammered in the film clip because they were. They just progressively got drunker and drunker throughout the clip.
Of course, because the video was shot on like the second day or day 3, probably the second day actually, Sunday. And they, you know, after listening to the mix, they were fine. They went off, and that was it. You know, didn't see them again till the film crew, and I still had to mix Laying Down the Law and stuff like that, and the B-side and do all that. So yeah, and then everyone came back in, and you know, everyone was totally hammered. You know, had a bit of a freshener, so to speak, and you know, just terrorised around. We shot the whole thing at Rhinoceros Studios, and that was that. Film was done. Okay, let's do the tour. Tour was done. Tour was great. The tour was like every band on the tour except the Triffids I produced. So it was like really weird and great, you know, like, you know, Jimmy, INXS, The Models, The Vinyls, Mental as Anything, The Saints. I'd mixed their Ghost Ships and stuff like that for them. And the only band I hadn't worked with was with the Triffids, which is ironic because it's probably Wide Open Road is probably my favourite Australian song ever. You know, but I had that. You know, but they were the only ones I hadn't worked with on that tour.
It was a celebration of Mark Opitz. There you go.
Well, it's not a celebration of events; it's a celebration of Australian music.
Exactly.
I just lucky enough to, you know, work with the Models and the Vinyls, Jimmy, INXS, and the Saints. So very lucky. You know, the Models were fantastic to work with. First song I did with them was Barbados, and I did a song called Out of Mind, Out of Sight, and that sort of turned things around. They went from being an alternate band into being a sort of a major band, I guess, with that. So I was pretty proud of that. I was very proud of what I did with Barbados in particular.
Yeah.
Out of Mind, Out of Sight, I tried a few experiments with brass on that I'd always, things that I'd always wanted to do with Adam. With brass, I'd always wanted to get someone just to jam on a track, brass, and then just get their jam and then just copy their jam, do a harmony on their jam, you know. And that's what I did with Out of Mind, Out of Sight, you know, all the brass that's on that. I just got James Valentine. I said, just jam, mate. Just do licks anywhere you like. And then when I got one, a take I really liked, put it together. I said, okay, now I want you to do a harmony to every one of those. Then I got Roger Mason, give me a brass sound on the Voitra keyboard and play a harmony again to tie all that together. So it sounds like the slickest brass section you've ever heard. But it all comes from just jamming, you know what I mean? Then sort of do harmonies to it.
Well, mate, it feels like we need a part 2 on this, because it's just been so good to catch up and talk about particularly those acts we covered off in the last hour or so, and you've had such an incredible career, and it's still well and truly going. And
there's no retiring, you know. For someone like me, you know, I haven't worked since I was in my mid-20s. You know, I've been just having fun. Yeah, sure, you've had the bad times and stuff like that, and COVID, and I've had times when, you know, like, you know, because my ambition, as I said at high school, was to be the best music producer in Australia. You know, the mistake with that, I just wish I would have said best music producer in the world. I mean, and that sounds vain, but I was a 17, 16-year-old when I thought of it. But it was, you know, I was driven. And so it was, you know, when I was starting to get all these awards and stuff like that, I thought, well, you get what you wish for, I suppose. And to tell you the truth, I've suffered from imposter syndrome my whole life. I just don't know how and why I've got the Order of Australia. I don't know how and why I've got an 8C Coombs from fellowship from ANU. I don't know why I've got all these gold and platinum records, because I'm just this guy who puts one foot in front of the other and hopes for the best. I've got no magic trick, got nothing, you know, and so I'm just waiting to be busted and found out for the fraud that I am, you know. But apparently my track record doesn't agree with that. So,
well done, mate. And look, once again, great to catch up, and thanks for all the time you've given me over the years. And I will lock in another chat with you. Hopefully, a year's time, we'll talk about all the other stuff we haven't managed to cover in the last hour. But Mark,
there's a lot to cover. We haven't talked about the Gurus or Noiseworks, or, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's still there. You know, all American stuff. Yeah. You know, working with Bob Dylan was a real thrill, things like that. But yeah, Becko, really lovely to speak to you, mate. And, you know, anytime.
Good on you.
Anytime.
Mark Opitz, thanks again. Talk to you soon.
Ciao for now. Thanks, mate.
How good was that? Mark Opitz on the rider. You can catch up on all the episodes you might have missed. Sarah McLeod, Jim Kerr from Simple Minds. And there's plenty more to come in the next few weeks. Next week, we go behind the scenes on the inner workings of Soundwave, Big Day Out, and then the downfall of both music festivals and what's to come from this incredible man. I'm talking about one of the great concert promoters of our modern time, Chris O'Brien. We'll talk to him next week on The Rider. We'll catch you then. This is The Rider with Becko.